Welcome to the Nuclear Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Nowicki, a former electrician's mate on the USS Minneapolis-St. Paul turned nuclear industry veteran with over 40 years of experience. From the U.S. to plants worldwide, I've not only led large engineering organizations, I've helped train nuclear leaders who keep nuclear power safe and strong. Each episode, we dive into the stories, challenges, and strategies of the dedicated people driving this vital industry. Let's spark some leadership excellence together. Andrea Garfield is a friend of the show, and I had her back on because I read an impactful book about focusing narrowly and then broadly, so you don't end up in a place you don't want to be. And this is my short episode with her. She brings up some really great points. So this is my friend Andrea Garfield about how to focus as you move up the company. Hello, Andrea Garfield. I'm excited to talk to you again.
Hey, Bill. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And you're part of the awesome institute. You're the CEO and you're an executive coach. And we've talked previously, and I read a book called Win the Inside Game. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is, like for me, having a hobby like podcasting has been great. And I've added to my life through it. But one of the fears I have is when I go all in and decide this is what I'm going to do for a career, leave my regular job where it's secure, that it'll now become my new job and I'll lose some of that joy that I have right now. And I'm sure you have executives you talk to that end up in a position that they've always wanted and then look around, maybe they don't have connections. So how do you help people kind of maybe add things back to their lives so they can get that enjoyment back?
Yeah, you're right. I do work with a lot of people that end up in that position. And oftentimes they come to me and they're like ready for the next big move right into the C-suite or even higher up within it. And then we talk about what they're excited about with the new role. And it's about hitting the goal. It's not actually about the job. It's not actually about what we'll do for their life. And so then we have to kind of like back up a little bit and say, what do you like to do? And what's fun for you? And more often than not, the answer is, I don't know, because it's been so long since I even asked that question or had time to think about it that I've completely lost track of what I like to do or what I want to do. I've just been building this life that I think I'm supposed to have with all of these goals and everything that comes along with that. So I think it's a great question that you're asking before this happens to you, because most people don't ask until way later. So I think like taking the time to ask the question is probably the most important part. So you're halfway there. And then I think for a lot of people, it's exploring. It's learning how to play again. It's trying things you think you won't like, and then finding out what you do like and what you are interested in and what kind of, draws you in and helps you find that spark again.
Yeah, it's funny because when I think back, I came up in the 80s and just having a job and taking care of my family became such a focus, and play to me felt like I was off track. And what you're describing is play is keeping you on track in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really common mentality. I think a lot of us were taught that, like growing up, adults are serious. People in, high-level positions of power are serious and they don't have time to screw around and whatever. So we have to kind of like retrain ourselves how to be fun again, really, in a lot of ways. I like to think about with kids, like, we start out as like a fun kid. We know how to play. If you've ever watched a little kid, they can play. Yeah. You put them in an empty room with like a piece of paper and they can figure out how to play with it, But we can have all of the most high-tech, amazing toys and things in the world, and we're bored, right? And so we have to take ourselves back to that childlike wonder and awe of the world. Part of why my company's named Awesome Institute is about the awe that we can kind of rediscover in the world and in our lives. We're really looking for it. It often doesn't happen on its own. You have to kind of go hunting for that.
Yeah. And to me, it's sad. I remember the story that they asked 5-year-olds, like, who's a dancer? And they all raise their hand. Who's a singer? They all raise their hand. Who's an artist? They all raise their hand. And they reproduce that as they age and they start taking their hands down. It's such a sad kind of sentiment to think that we're not increasing what people can do or opening their eyes to the world. We're closing them down. And I've taken improv classes very similar where you're told just to respond. And I can remember one guy, we had a scene, and after the scene, the guy's like, I don't know what to do. We start a scene, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what the person's going to say. And the instructor guy said, you answer the phone, don't you? And he says, yeah. And he said, what do you say? And he goes, hello. And he goes, try that. But it was so painful hearing this poor guy trying to just not sit there with a stunned look on his face, but he got so far in his head. And I think once I went through that class and became more present at the end and was able to be in scenes, and now that I stand in front of people and I give them leadership tips, I'm able to play off the crowd because I went through that. But it was almost like deconstructing all that stuff that tells you, man, you're not a good dancer, you're not a good singer, which I'm not, but you know what I mean? That whole mindset shift. And do you have any specific examples of people like high up that you had to really say, this is what I want you to try just to get them out of it or get them back in the play mode?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'm going to back up just a second. Yeah. I think what you bring up is a really great point with improv is that essentially most of us have been criticized our entire lives. Even if we had great parents, even if we had great teachers, don't do this, don't do that. You're doing it wrong.
Can't laugh in church. Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of our education has been, don't do it like that. Do it like this. You're doing it wrong. Red pen on the tests, right? Like wrong. Right. SATs, like college.
You start out at 100 and they just keep taking off till you get to the answer. Oh, darn it.
Yeah. And then in work too, right? All the things you're doing great in your job, you show up for your review. It's like, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. They might say like areas for improvement, but we all know it's the red pen again. Right. And so we get this red pen in our own minds and we start critiquing ourselves and we start making safe choices that are not going to be marked down. And so we're constantly criticizing ourselves and holding ourselves back from things that kids aren't doing, right? That kid is going to sing. My daughter was just in a performance last week. The kids were singing, they were playing guitar. It was not necessarily the best musical experience in the world, but they were having a ball and they thought they were awesome. And they were just, there was no criticism happening for them, right? And so for us, we have to start recognizing our own criticism in order to start to let go of it. So I think that's an important part of it is like, can we observe ourselves? Can we notice that inner critic? Or can we notice the times when we're just like avoiding failing at things? Avoiding that red pen is kind of how I like to think about it. And then we actually have a chance at learning how to play. So I had a client a few years ago who had some grandkids that were like 3, 4, or 5. And one of his practices with me was to get down on the ground. I think they came over a few times a week. They lived close by. And so he would get down on the ground to play with them, not up at the table, not talking with them, not just like going for walks with them, but like down on the ground, wrestling, playing with balls, like doing different things. And he, like your friend in improv, felt so awkward and uncomfortable. And it's like such an inefficient way of doing things. Like, what am I even doing down here on the ground? And he really learned like how to have fun. There was nobody watching. There was no red pen. And as he got more and more used to it, he started to just have a great time. He started to build his relationship with his grandkids. And I think he started to bring more of that sense of play and a little less criticism into other parts of his life, right? He was the CEO of a big company.
Yeah, and you think about him, I hope he's more approachable. I hope he can experience people differently. And I remember we talk about in our leadership courses, like when you see someone coming down the hallway, you get a feeling is the first thing. And what is that feeling that people get from you when they see you?
I love
It's
that.
like, yeah. And I think it's a great way to kind of back into what you describe as kind of opening up the way people look at the world and getting back to being more like a child where you're thinking broader and just differently about things. A lot of the leaders that hopefully listen to this podcast have really difficult, demanding jobs. One guy I talked to today, a 2-hour commute, an hour up and an hour back, and he's getting up at 4:00 in the morning. He says, I really don't have time when I get home to go to my kids' games. And he's kind of in that hamster wheel type position. It's a highly technical job. Even in those environments, it sounds like it's still important to, have a hobby, have ways that you can release, and otherwise things start happening that are negative and negative consequences. And I bet people come to see you that have experienced those consequences and now have to go back and relook at things. Do you find that that's what you do with a lot of times, instead of trying to solve a specific problem, opening up their lives a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. One of the ways that we talk about this kind of coaching is it's like way of being coaching. So sort of like the way we are in the world as people is also the way that we are as leaders, or the way that we are at work. And so when we can help people shift their way of being as humans, it changes things in all areas of life for them. They come to me for like fancy leadership coaching, then we end up like shifting the way that they're living and the way they see the world and the way people feel them in the world. And, I think there's this like misconception that we need a lot of time, like we need to have this big hobby, or we need to do all these big things. And, you don't really need that much time to be playful. So last night, we're fostering some kittens that were like born next door. There's 5 of them. It's been crazy for the last few weeks. And so my daughter and I were feeding them in the big bathroom. And we got in the giant bathtub, and we're like dry, like we're just like sitting in the bathtub, and the cats are jumping in. We're just like wedged in there together. It didn't take any more time than it would have been to just sit there and like, deal with the kittens. But instead, like we got in the bathtub for the first time, and it was super fun. It's silly, and there's cats jumping everywhere. And, it took 2 minutes. It took 5 minutes, right? And it wasn't any extra time. But if I wasn't in the habit of looking for ways to be playful and to have fun and to connect, like find novelty and just be goofy, then I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have been like, come on, let's get these cats back in the other room, and let's get you to bed, and like, brush your teeth and all that stuff. And so we can find little fun ways of making life more interesting, right? It can be a dance party while you're cooking dinner. It can be a goofy call on your commute. Like it can be listening to something fun and like singing at the top of your lungs. It's not like you have to listen to learning leadership podcasts every moment you're in the car. But I know people that do that, right? They're listening to like business nonfiction at 1.5 speed all the time. And it's like, that's not fun. It might be, but it's not playful,
And it's almost, you're describing moments. And I think back to my own life with my brother. So we had a chaotic family. We had a large family. People would yell and cry sometimes. And there was so much going on. And my brother and I would just take off, and we'd create these little adventures. We'd go and break rocks open and just crazy stuff we came up with. We built a raft. We cut down a bunch of trees and sling them together, threw them on a pond. It took all day. And regardless of whether the thing worked or the project came out, we had an adventure that was so important to us for our own mental health, looking back, because when we went home, we didn't know what to expect. But this way we can kind of control our environment, have some fun, enjoy one another's company. We didn't really talk a lot. We didn't talk about what was going on at home. We couldn't process or whatever, but it was just that time together. And I find that I still do those type of adventures. I create them for myself. And I guess, I don't know if you want to comment about that, but it's fine.
I do. I think that's amazing. And what a great memory. And you can use that as an inspiration to get back in touch with that sense of adventure, right? If you had lost, it sounds like you haven't lost touch with that. But if you had, you could think back to those adventures you had with your brother and say, like, how could I find these moments of adventure in my life now, right? Without major changes.
And I think too, like my wife and I are going to sign up for a stand-up comedy class here in the next couple months. We've already decided, but one of the reasons, and I think I've experienced this, is I was going through a lot the first time I signed up for improv and stand-up, but I had something to look forward to. I didn't have to go back to the 1-bedroom apartment with a blow-up mattress because I couldn't get my stuff out fast enough and all that crazy stuff that was going on. I didn't think about it at the time, but I created those adventures to prevent the chaos from getting in my head. So I kind of relived that as an adult, but
it sounds like a really healthy coping strategy for
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my wife now has to go do stand up in front of people, but I think she'll have a good time. But I get excited. Last weekend we went on a long bike ride, a 2-hour bike ride. It was 30 something miles. And it's a beautiful section of Georgia. It's an old railway. It goes through no towns or anything. And there's all this shaded area, and you move fast enough where it's cool in the summer. But I wanted to experience that with her. So to watch her experience her first time was so exciting to me, and so much joy that I relived my joy doing it the first time. But I will have that moment and build that relationship based on experimentation and fun and creating that world that I think every leader should consider for themselves. Is don't just say, well, I have this, I have that, I have all these obligations, and not take care of that part of you that needs tending.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we have to remember that, like, work isn't forever, right? Like, jobs end, companies fail, companies get acquired as a celebratory event, like people retire, like at some point it ends, right? And hopefully we have a lot more of life to enjoy after it does end. And so I've worked with lots of clients too that, like, were starting to think about retirement, but they'd spent 25 or 30 years building companies or building their careers. And they're like, how do I even think about retirement? I don't know what I would do with myself. I guess I would advise companies and invest and, like, do all this other stuff. And, like, that sounds exactly like working.
Yeah.
That's not actually retirement. But they couldn't even wrap their heads around what it would be like. And so we started to build hobbies and interests and experiments. And a couple of them are now retired and report back to me pretty frequently about how things are going. And, you know, they're playing tennis and they're sailing and they're going on trips around the world. And one of them is taking a welding class. And whereas, like, I had gotten him to sign up for an art class of something he didn't particularly enjoy, but it got him started in being bad at something and having fun anyways. And then trying other things and seeing what is fun and what he's good at. And they're not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
I always want to have a practice of doing something that I'm really bad at. I think, especially as a coach, but I think it's true for leaders too. We get so used to being experienced and competent and good at things. And then we have clients or more junior employees or whatever, people that are new to the company, and we forget what it's like to not know what we're doing.
Right.
So I feel like if I'm always doing something that I suck at, then I don't forget what that feels like, right? And it's also a practice to learn how to have fun doing something you're not good at. Some of us, like, find it really hard to enjoy things that we're bad But with enough practice, you too can have fun doing something you're bad at.
That's a great way to end things. Andrea, I really appreciate your time. It's always fun to talk to you. And thanks for letting me talk through some of this stuff that I'm going through.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I hope you have more adventures soon.
Yeah, I'll let you see my stand-up routine when it goes out there.
Can't wait. You're going to have a podcast about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right. Take care. All right. You want to stop? There you have it, Andrea Garfield. I know there was a lot you could take from that. I'll let you select what you really want to choose to take from that. But I will say her approach to leadership has so many advantages for people, especially as you move up a company. I interviewed many people, and when I talked to them, especially about leadership positions, why do you want this job? A lot of them said it's the next step. And I'm like, that's interesting. I don't look at the world like that, going up the ladder or whatever. And it kind of paid off for me, because when the right job showed up, I took it versus just taking the next job in the list of jobs that I could have. So something to consider. And Andrea's perspective, I think, really helps people. And I would hope you would get a coach as you develop in your career somehow. You even reach out to me if you want, bill@nuclearleader.com. I'd love to talk to you about your challenges, maybe get some experts, or I can give you some information or some coaching if you need it. Thanks for listening. That's it for this episode of The Nuclear Leader. Thanks for joining me as we shine a light on the people powering nuclear safety and success. If you're inspired to lead better, subscribe, share, and drop us a review. Until next time, stay sharp and keep leading the way.